to a special edition of Four Brothers, Four Sisters this week. We've got some really great talent here on the table. At the table, we've got our lovely Ruth Rhedrick. Ruth representing our boomer generation in the best way. We've got Lesli over here with Gen X. Love it. We've got Aubri with Gen Z. And then, of course, me. I'm Andi with the millennials. Love it. So we have heard your feedback. And yes, now we are ready to do Four Sisters because you know what? What's better than a woman's perspective on good things happening in the church? Or maybe some bad things. I don't know. We'll see. some constructive things. You know, maybe, yeah. So last episode, there was the Four Brothers was Wake Me Up. This one, we've got, what is our title this time? Tea Time. Tea Time. But this is going to be different than your average tea time. This is going to be serious but good.
Yes.
Serious but fun. How about that? How about that?
Yes. That's good.
All right. So our topic overviews. We've got Aubri first here with The Church is Failing Our Modern Civil Rights Movement, which that's pretty intense. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, so as Andi said, my topic is the church is failing our modern civil rights movement. And basically while I was thinking about this topic, I was just thinking about history. I'm a big history buff. I love all things history. 2 generations ago, when we had the civil rights movement, the church was at the center of that movement. You know, the church served as a safe haven for revolution. There would be protests organized there, you know, marches organized there. But now we look at the church, specifically the black church back then, but now we look at the church as a whole, both the black church and the church overall. And it's almost radio silent on, you know, a general front. So my critique right now comes from a person who is both an avid Christ follower and someone who, you know, is looking for justice and is interested in the justice of all people. And I am assuming everybody here is also a Christ follower, and everybody probably watching right now are also Christ followers. So how can we sit on our hands? Some of us sit on our hands when we see people being oppressed. How can we sit on our hands when we see poverty, when we see police brutality, when we see people literally dying in the streets for no reason? And so my main critique with this is that the statement Black Lives Matter, just saying Black Lives Matter in the church, is controversial. I'm saying Black Lives Matter, Black lives that are made in his image are matter, and that's controversy. So why? Knowing that the Holy Spirit abides within us, how do we not feel that conviction? Like, how do we not just want to go and do something? You know what I mean? And so one of the main sources, like just for some history and some background, is that theologians have this paradox called otherworldly religion versus this worldly religion. And otherworldly religion basically means that the Christians that are focused on just on salvation and not on changing our material conditions here. And the this worldly religion is focused on changing our circumstances here and also on the salvation of our souls. So of course we believe that God can change every single circumstance right now in a blink of an eye. He can change it. But he also gave us the ability and blessed us with the ability to organize, to march, to support each other. So why don't we do it? And this whole thing was summarized in Isaiah 1:17 when the Bible says, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause. So just so you can marinate on it. How much further along could we be as a society if we kept Christ in the church in the center of the civil rights movement?
That's good.
Very
All right.
good. Very good.
Time of response. Anyone want to go for it?
I mean, I agree with everything you said. Totally. I've had this conversation myself with, you know, in my own household and with peers and everything. And I've said it before. I was like, wow. There are instances where the church is failing people. The church university is failing. We have this mandate, you know, yeah, we're supposed to be winning souls, but we're also supposed to be community for one another. We're supposed to be helping to restore each other's dignity and all these wonderful things, everything that you mentioned, and we are failing at that. And like you, I find it hard that the very institution that was responsible for spearheading this movement, especially, like you said, in the Black community, is like now, oh, we can't talk about that. We can't stand for that. You know, it's like this. You said it. The church has forgotten the concept of imago Dei. We are all, regardless of your sex, regardless of your race, regardless of your economic situation, regardless of any of those things. We are all created in the image of God.
Yeah.
We are all deserving of justice, dignity, and all those things. So yeah,
For sure. I think from my perspective, and maybe I can say, I don't want to speak for all white people, but the white perspective is also how much has the evangelical church whitewashed Jesus, right?
That
So
part,
if you
yeah.
grow up, I grew up thinking Jesus was white. He's not. He's a brown man from the Middle East, and he did not look like the pictures that we see portrayed of Jesus. You know what I mean? And so I think the church as a whole, not just the black church, but also the white church, needs to come to reckoning with the fact that we have changed our perspective of who Jesus is and what he did. Because if we really look at the Bible and the New Testament, Jesus was a radical. He did not come as, obviously he was humble and meek and serving of people, but he also said, I can flip tables too. And I'm here to tell you that what you're doing is not right. And I didn't come in the way that you thought I was going to come. I'm coming differently. And I think that you're right. We need to change that perspective. And I'm not sure exactly what the answer is, because I was frustrated too, because of course during the pandemic we saw this exacerbate is we watch people, as we are all sitting at our homes not really doing anything, watch an innocent black man die on the streets of one of our cities, and then people are angry because we say Black Lives Matter. And I was frustrated at the lack of response I saw from the church, and I don't really know what the issue is here, because if we are all Christians and we believe that all lives matter, Black Lives Matter, that's part of that. There's nothing wrong with saying that. So I don't know what to say. I don't have an answer, but I agree with you.
Most definitely, I agree as well. And I think a lot of what I can see as being a child brought up during the 60s and the civil rights, and I saw how closely the church worked with the civil rights movement. To see that and to look at the church where we are now, honestly, I think a lot of Christians are too comfortable in the way we're living now. A lot of African Americans have made it, so to speak, as opposed to where we were in the 60s when we had to fight for something. We wanted more. And so now they're in a place where that's their problem, not mine. And so we have sort of separated ourselves into an area where, I say, that's their problem. That's not my problem. And so we need to come together again as a people, as a whole, regardless of race, creed, or color, or economic status, and realize that in order for us to get ahead, we must all work together. And so due to that separation that has taken place within our own culture, that is a lot of why we don't see that support in black churches that we saw back during the 60s. That's my opinion.
I would have to agree. I think, just speaking for my generation, I think that not only if the church were to help with the civil rights movement, they wouldn't just be aiding the cause, but they would also be aiding the cause in heaven. Because how much better would it be to instead, I like Kendrick Lamar, that's all his song, All Right, is the marching anthem. But how much greater of an impact could we have if our anthem was a gospel song?
Right.
You know what I mean? How much greater of an impact could we make if you saw church leaders, if you saw, your pastors, your deacons, your ministers, whatever, leading that march? MLK, he was a reverend. He was leading these marches. He was doing all these things. And of course, he never lost sight of his original goal of, making more disciples, because that's what drove him to do what he did. We're trying to make disciples, trying to bring people to heaven. So we're saving souls here. And we should also be focusing on their souls as they're on earth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very good.
Absolutely.
Right.
We don't have all the ansers, but that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I think it starts with conversations just like
Absolutely.
these.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Ruth, would you like to go with your statement? It's a pretty good one. Heaven and hell are real, whether you believe it or not.
Yes, I mean, that piggybacks well off of what Aubri just talked about, especially with our young people and with the church not being involved in their social justice issues. because, as she said, Dr. Martin Luther King not only was fighting to help for social rights, but he also wanted more disciples to come into the house of the Lord and become Christians. And so we have a lot of young people now who are even debating whether the Bible is true, or some of them say that was for then, it's not for us now. And so if they cannot relate to, if we as boomers cannot relate to the young people on their level, come to where they are and show them how Christianity can tie into civil rights, then how do we expect for them to believe that Christ is who he says he is and that heaven and hell is real? They just don't believe it. And a lot of that non-belief falls on us as leaders who should have set better examples for you all to believe that heaven and hell is real, because the Bible clearly states, Revelations 20:10 tells us that hell is a place of punishment. That a lot of people say, well, how could a just God? You say, oh, so if your God is so good, you're telling me that he's going to torment people forever and forever, in the lake of fire? That doesn't make sense. To them it doesn't make sense. But because we believe in his word, that his word does say hell is real, just like heaven is real. Immediately when you die, if you are a believer, your spirit is going to be in the presence of Jesus. But if you're an unbeliever, you're going to be there, okay? And it's not going to be a pretty thing. And at the end, when the second coming comes and you're either going to heaven or you're going to hell, at that point they will believe. But guess what? They'll be in hell believing, and they'll be tormented. So how do we reach people? And I'm going to say the young, since we started with the young people. How do we get them to understand that truly heaven and hell is real? You're on a college campus. Do you see that? Do you hear that as a Christian? Some of the young people that just really don't believe that to be true.
I have heard that people don't believe that heaven or hell is real, and that there's like this big purgatory, or that your soul is just gone, like you never existed, or of course reincarnation. But I think a lot of times, especially from my generation, we have this whole like live fast, die young kind of mentality. So we don't really think about the consequences, like our eternal consequences to our actions. And I think a lot of the times that comes from Gen Zs who claim to be Christian and who don't model a Christian lifestyle. Because if you have a non-believer looking at somebody who claims to be a Christian, somebody who claims to go to church and has all these Bible verses in their bios, and they're not living in accordance to the Bible, in accordance to what Jesus said, then obviously the non-believer is going to think that there is no heaven or hell, because if there was, you wouldn't be acting like that. So I think that is one of the main deterrents.
Exactly what Pastor preached about this morning, that we have to be foolish followers, and they have to see that in us. Because if they see us worrying like they're worrying, then, hey, so if your God is all of that in a bag of chips, then why does your situation look just like mine? So they have to be able to see something different. And again, I say, as boomers, we have not done a good job in showing our young people, the younger generations, that the truth is to follow Jesus Christ, because we have not shown it. We may say it, and we may be in church every Sunday, but then going back to, where are we when you all are out there fighting for justice and the righteousness of everybody?
I think that would be my big thing with, I think, the boomer generation. I feel like, I think people, especially young people these days, we're just looking for authenticity. And it's been, I feel like, kind of hard to see authenticity in the church today. It's that we just come to church. It's a thing. I'm here. I'm worshiping the Lord. Great. And I'm going to leave.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And it's not permeating our lives. And it's not something that we can be real and honest about what we're struggling with, and talk about the hard topics like Black Lives Matter, or, sexual purity, or things like that. Or is heaven and hell real? I think people are asking the questions and they're having a hard time. It's just, we're not seeing open on authenticity in the church. And I think that can go through every generation. Needs to work on that. But I think that's like the biggest crux I have, and the biggest issue I see.
So true.
I think, you asked Aubri, why do you think they don't? And then you both answered it with pretty much the same question. And really, it's like, people don't believe that heaven and hell are real because you got Christians out here not living like heaven and hell are real.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
And again, that's back on us. And like you said, setting examples. But I believe most people's reaction to hell or rejection of hell stems from them seeing it as God being this petty, sadistic, vengeful guy who's like, let me torture these people who don't agree with what I say. You know, and when that's not it at all. You know, God created us with free will. So really, you guys, he's saying, hey, yeah, heaven, hell is real, but I'm giving you a choice here. You know, you can choose not to go there. But again, one, we've got to live like it's real in front of people.
That's right.
And then make sure that they understand that there is the alternative of heaven, which is just as real. Yeah. So, yeah.
Exactly.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
I actually have just one more thing to say
Okay.
about heaven and hell. I also think that a lot of Christians, especially in my generation, they don't think of hell as like separation from God, and they don't think of heaven as being with God. Like they just think of it like, this is this good place and this is this bad place. You don't want to go to this bad place. You want to go to this good place. And they don't really recognize the things that you have to do to get to heaven. They think that it's like all this long list of things, like you can never sin, you can never do all of this, you can and so that's why a lot of the times they kind of give up on that, because they're like, I mean, I've sinned, like I've done bad things, I've lied, I've cheated, I've done whatever, and they don't think that they're necessarily worthy of heaven and they think about it in the theoretical and not in like the actual. So I think it's on us to explain to them that it's really easy, you know, as easy as ABC, as they say.
Yep.
So I think that would, if we taught it like that, and if we were praying for them in that manner, then they would turn around and realize that heaven and hell is real, and they would act in accordance to the Bible.
I think we kind of overcomplicate it too. You know, when Jesus was sharing the gospel with the masses, he said, "Let the little children come." If a child can understand it, anyone can understand it. And we don't want to complicate God and say that it's all these things. Or there's something you need to do. It's that you come as you are, your authentic self, and God loves you and wants the best for you, and loves you enough to not leave you in that place where you're at right now.
Exactly.
And for those of us who are telling people this story and telling them this narrative, stop living like, you know, you haven't ever sinned. The word says we've all fallen short. We've all sinned. We've all done it. And guess what? Yeah, I see. I'm like Aubri. Yeah, I'm saying I've done bad things. But you know what? I'm still assured of heaven. I mean, you know, and you can be too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Being authentic and letting them know that I believe and I'm a Christian, and I know that God loves me, and I know that my name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. But you only have two choices. It's only heaven or hell. So whether you believe it or not, it's going to happen. So if you know that it's going to happen, at least let's go with the right way, okay? Let's go with the right way. So we can show them better than we can tell them by our actions and by the way we live and by the way we behave.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of speaking of the way we behave, Leslie's got a really good kind of, it sounds controversial. I don't really think it is controversial.
I don't think it is.
But Lesli, your topic, submission is not a dirty word.
Tell
us what you mean.
It is not
Go for
rated
it.
X.
Can't wait to hear this. It's going to be good.
So I think that submission has got a bad rep. You know, and people hear and it's like, I'm not submitting anybody, I'm not giving away. So first I wanted to just break down and say what submission is, what it isn't, and who it's for.
Okay.
When you understand that, you can get a better understanding of what it is, and it doesn't seem so like, ooh, you know. And I want to start by saying what it is not.
Okay.
So one, it's not, ladies, it is not doing whatever your man says.
Okay.
Whenever he says, do this right
That's
now.
right.
It is
That's
not blind
That's
obedience.
not it.
Okay? That is not it.
That's not it.
It's also not giving up your power, your authority, your identity, things that God blessed you with.
Right.
You know, and I heard somebody say this, and we were having this conversation. If that man was attracted to, dated, and then married you as the feisty, opinionated, independent boss queen that you were, what makes you think that he now wants you to change and not be that?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yes, be who. So that's not what submission is, you guys. And you know, probably. And if he is the kind of guy to think like, you know what, I'm going to change her. I'm going to change her. That's a whole other problem.
Right.
You don't want that man because guess what? He's like, I'm gonna make her a good wife.
Yeah.
No, the word says he who finds a wife, not he who makes a wife.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so that part. And submission also isn't control. It's not about. It is about control, but not how you think. It's not about taking control. It's about being able to relinquish.
Right. That's it.
control.
That's it.
And there's a freedom in that, which leads right into talk about what submission is. But sub, it means to go under. So you're going under the authority. And you guys, we all have to do that.
Right.
Everybody has to be under the authority of somebody else. You do it in your job. You do it driving down the road when you know you got to go to speed limit.
That's
you know,
right. That's
you're
right.
submitting
We're
to the
submitting.
laws of the land. Everybody does it. So submission means to simply put yourself under the authority of someone else, right?
Right.
And it is a choice because guess what? You can choose to do it or choose to not do it and suffer the consequences.
That's it.
You know,
Like heaven or hell.
it's freedom. Like I said, it's giving up those things outside of your scope, your ability, you know, to whoever you're submitting to or whatever. And it's guidance. Because here's the thing, it's guidance in that, you know, if this is something that I have to relinquish because it is outside my scope and my responsibility, then the person who I'm relinquishing that to, they're going to guide me in what to do. And if they don't know, then you know what? They've got somebody guiding them. So that's what it is. Who is it for? So it's for husbands and wives.
Yes.
I had this conversation with my daughter who is single, 19. I was like, you don't submit to a boyfriend, sweetie.
No.
You submit to a husband.
That's
okay?
right.
Yeah.
Let's get that part
Submission is
clear.
for people who want spiritual stability and alignment too, because it means they want to be in a right relationship with God. And I don't want to go over it and everything, but you know, you place your authority under His will, His way, His word, or whatever. And I just my last thing that. Well, anyway, I'm not gonna hold. Somebody said hold a little something back, but it is it is for married people. And Ephesians 5th chapter, 1 Peter 3rd chapter, 1 Corinthians 11th chapter, Colossians 3rd chapter. It all talks about wives and husbands, not boyfriends and girlfriends.
Right.
You know, so ladies, you shouldn't be submitting to a boyfriend, and boyfriends, you shouldn't be expecting that of her. So.
Well, I think what you're touching on is kind of the problem, though, is that I feel like some of the teachings of the church have led people to believe that it's a bad word, and that I feel like every time I've heard a sermon on Ephesians,
Submission.
it's talking about submission, and they're always like, "Ladies, what up? Time to submit," and I'm like. Okay, I feel like we're missing half the conversation here because it's not just about us.
Right.
It's about how the men in this situation also have to act.
That's right.
And what the onus is on them to do. And I feel like oftentimes we skip over it and that what they've been asked to do is much more weightier, I feel like.
It is.
25th and 26th verse.
To
that they don't.
what we have been asked to do. They have been asked to lay down their life like Christ laid down his life for the church.
Right.
And I feel like whenever I hear a sermon on submission, it's just like, ladies, submit. Here we go. Time to do what you have to
forgetting the
do.
part.
And I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is not it. And it also just leads to like, it's all on us. But the responsibility is if I am a husband and I am leading and I'm guiding my wife and we're in a relationship together, which is a back and forth kind of, we're compromising. It's not that I have complete authority over you,
her.
but I feel like that's kind of what it's almost preached as. And I think that's kind of where we get like women are like, well, I don't want to do that. Why does that sound fun? And honestly, and this might just be a little bit, this might sound bad, but I think it's also because what we hear it from is always a man
Man's
preaching it.
perspective.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so can we get the other side over here? You know what I mean?
Today we can.
Today we can, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's my thought on it.
And I think if the teaching comes from the pulpit, submission in reference to God and to Jesus Christ, more so to speaking of the woman being submissive to her husband. If they can get that into the minds of the man and the woman and children and young women, you know, that your submission is to God first and foremost.
Yeah.
And if we get that in order, then I think when a husband finds a wife, then she automatically knows that her position is a form of submission based on his relationship with God. And then I'm fall up under him because he's the head of the house. So it's all in how we're taught. And as you say, being a boomer, that's what we heard. Women, give it up to your husband. If he said have dinner ready, have dinner ready. If he says you're not wearing that dress, you're not wearing that dress. And so that's how it was during my generation and the generation before me. But now we have these generations here, and they're like, do what, when, how? I know you're not talking to me, because I make my own money, and I can buy what I want, and I can eat where I want, and I can go where I want to go. But it's, as I said, if we could get Christians to get that concept of submission to Jesus, then when women do get married, they can understand that concept of submission to their husbands. Yeah, and it's not a dirty word.
I think coming from my generation, obviously a lot of us aren't, married or anything, and I'm not married. But the word submission and submission in the church, like we said, kind of has a negative connotation. And I know for a lot of the women in my generation, non-believers and, believers, we've done so much work to dismantle the patriarchy. We've done so much work to destroy heteronormativity.
Like going back.
And it just seems, it seems like we're going backwards. Obviously, I understand that in the context, and my generation doesn't submit to anything. We were talking about before we started running. We're not submitting to jobs. We don't submit to bosses. Nothing. We don't even submit to the government. We're not submitting to nobody. So I think that if, like you said, if we started to understand that submission from like a man and a wife in marriage, the man is submitting to God and the woman is submitting to the man, and in turn she's submitting to God as well. So it's kind of like a chain reaction, and the whole head of the household. A lot of my generation didn't really have a head of their household. And if they did, he wasn't submitting to God. So his wife wasn't submitting to him. And so the whole idea of submission is theoretical. They haven't seen it. They don't know it. So I don't know what can be done about that, considering that the damage is already done. But moving forward, I think that we should establish what submission really means.
But also just being open and honest about those conversations and being like, hey, this is what submission is, and this is what it's not. And this is what, and you know what? Not every book on marriage gets it right, because, we have to look at what God says in the Bible and not what people are writing on a piece of paper. Because I've read some books and I'm just like, if that's what you think submission is, I don't know.
It's not happening with me.
It's not going to be me. And I just know, growing up in the evangelical church my entire life, I was told, when you get older and you get married, you're going to have to submit to your husband. And this is what it means, is that you do what he tells you to do. And I was like, that doesn't sound like fun at all. But that's the thing, is that that's the wrong picture of marriage and what it really is. Because you know what? I've been married to my husband almost 6 years, and I have the most fun. We have a great time. We enjoy hanging out with each other and being with each other. And it's because it's the right type of submission and the right type of relationship. And I think that we just have to be careful about what we're saying about submission.
Yeah, right. Yeah. See, I've been married as long as this baby been alive. And so I've learned some things. But like I was telling you earlier, I didn't have the right. I didn't have models growing up of what that was supposed to look like either. I had to learn it. But I can tell you, if you're having problems submitting, and then I want to speak to the guys too, if you're having problems submitting, it's mostly because it's probably because of one or two things. You don't trust his authority, or you don't trust his motives. And you need to evaluate and figure out why that is and pray about it. But it's one of those two things. Either his authority, like, I don't trust him because he's not lined up right. Or I don't think he has my best interest at heart, in which case you don't need to be with him. But men, if she is not submitting to you, or you're not receiving submission, it's because you haven't loved her effectively enough to earn her respect and her trust, right? That's
it
what
works
the
both
word
ways.
says.
Yes.
The word says that you have to love her, like you said, as Christ loved the church. And, you know, he gave himself up. He died for it. And yeah, you definitely have responsibility.
Absolutely.
Heard a brother say, you can't lead yourself out of a wet paper bag, but you want her to follow you? No, no, not happening.
That's
man. Oh,
That's
man.
a good one, Leslie.
Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like what your topic was kind of leads really well into what my topic is. So here we go again. I like to be controversial. God is less concerned about your purity than he is your salvation. And maybe I can say it a different way. God is more concerned about your salvation than he is about your purity. And so a few caveats before we get started. I'm not saying that we have to, like, that purity is wrong or that it's not God's will. And I'm not saying that we as a church or Christians should go out and go sleep with a bunch of people because I don't think that's God's will either. But I think we need to talk honestly and openly about the church's teaching on purity and how it's been harmful to generations of women and men, and how it's taught some lies, and it's unfortunate. So for me, my story, I just remember growing up in the church, and I think I was 13 or 14. We had the conversation, right? The guys got to go off and do something fun. The girls got to stay behind and listen to our pastor's wife talk about purity. And she pulled out 3 different cups. She pulled out a styrofoam cup that you would use to put coffee in. She pulled out a regular everyday mug. And then she pulled out a piece of fine china. And she said, it's your choice as to which cup you get to be in your life. And she said a styrofoam cup is just used once and thrown away. An everyday mug is used daily. And it's not that special. It's not really worth much. It just gets put in the cupboard. But the piece of fine china, that is something so precious and so valuable, you only take it out on special occasions. And it's worth something, and it's valuable. And she said, if you give yourself away to a man, you are like that styrofoam cup. You're just thrown away. It's worthless. It's a piece of trash. If you're like this everyday mug and you keep giving yourself up to men, it's not that special. It really isn't worth anything. But if you choose to save yourself for marriage, you are like this piece of fine china, special and valuable. And I walked away from that thinking, because I had already struggled with sexual thoughts and other issues, like other things. And I thought, I am like that piece of trash. And I just felt so much guilt and so much shame. And it just continued because I listened to, that was not the only metaphor or analogy that was used. I've seen roses given around. Who would want that rose that looks disgusting after everyone passed it around? No one. And it's like, I thought I was worthless because I was having what I now know were normal thoughts about sex. And because it's normal. And so there are some studies that have been done. So this is just pretty insane. There was a study of 20,000 evangelical women done by a woman her name is Sheila Gregor. And she's written several books on sex and marriage. And it says 81% of women believe boys want to push girls' boundaries. And the reality is that high school girls who believe that they must be the sexual gatekeepers grow up to be less sexually satisfied in marriage. And 59% of women feel that they have to engage in sex only because I feel that I have to, and not because they want to. And I think that the church has just lost the point of talking about sex. And what we really want to talk about is that sexual purity and reinforcing and talking about these things, it should focus on who women are in Christ and how God wants us to live a life free of shame and guilt. There are so many verses in the Bible, Galatians 5:1, Galatians 5:13, 2 Corinthians 3:17, Romans 8:1, Colossians 1:13, talking about living in freedom of everything that holds us back because Jesus paid it all.
Yes.
And that is not what the church has been doing. And I feel very strongly about that. So that is my.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a unique perspective, and I think that it's a perspective that is seldom heard in the church. But I think that, like as you said, it's not a sin to want to be pure. It's not a sin to want to be modest and things like that. But it's like, why are we pushing it? Are you pushing it so that they can be their best selves, be more like Christ, or are you pushing it because you want to control women? It's like, obviously everybody has heard about the whole like sex outside of marriage is like a fire outside of a fire pit. And the fire pit is marriage and the fire is sex. It's better in the pit. It's supposed to happen in the pit. Outside of it, it's dangerous. Cool. So why? Like we say all these things. We say about the cup. We say that women need to be pure, need to be modest. Why? And then what about men? Because it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's my perspective, and I know that my perspective is shared by most of the people in my generation. Just because a lot of them don't buy into any of the rhetoric that they've heard. We question everything. Why? What's the point?
I think for boomers, in reference to our younger generations now, that was the way we were taught. You're exactly right. But to be able to look at what is going on in society today, they are exposed to more. We even look at female-female relationships, male-male relationships. We can even look at adultery or divorce. But the one thing about all of those things is God loves us all. And if we could instill into our young people that, yes, we're all going to do something. We have all done something. There are preachers who were not virgins before they got married. There are preachers that are divorced. So all of those aspects of life are real. But God still loves you. In spite of whatever you do, as you say, when we are teenagers, that sexual desire is there because of the flesh. That's just who we are. God knows that we are flesh, and we're going to have sinful thoughts and sinful desires. But that doesn't stop him from loving us. And so if we can get our young people or people in general to understand, we're all going to do something, regardless of what it is. We're all going to do something, but he still loves us. Repent of our actions and move on. He has forgiven us. He all of that's on the cross. He took all of that away on the cross. So we got to get them to understand you're going to do things, and you're going to go through life, and you're going to make some mistakes, and you're going to choose to go this way or go that way. But put God first, no matter what you do. When you mess up, come back to God. If you haven't come to him now, and you will see. You don't have to change yourself. He'll change you. You know, for the prostitute out there, well, I don't want to come to church because everybody's going to look at me. They know what I do. You can't change yourself. But come to God and watch him change you.
Yeah, I just
They
think
have to understand that he does the change.
Absolutely.
You know, no matter what. Live your life because you're going to do what you're going to do. He gives us that free will, as we've already stated earlier. We make the choices that we make. But put God, if we can get them to understand, just put your faith in God and trust him first and foremost.
Right.
And he will clean you up, change you up. You won't feel dirty anymore, you know?
I think I agree. I totally agree. But I think the church just needs to work on its narrative around that.
Exactly.
And that I agree. I know that's what we all believe in our heart of hearts.
But it's not
But
happening.
we need to work on how we treat people and how we treat sexual sin in the church. Because when I grew up, I remember sitting in our pew, and I didn't understand this at the time, but as I've gotten older, I understand now. But there were two young people who had to stand up in front of the entire church and apologize for what they had done. And I'm just like, if we are talking about living in freedom and not in shame and guilt, that is not the way to do things. We cannot sit here and say, you have to come apologize, because then we would have to ask everyone to come up here and
That's
apologize.
right.
Because we are all equal
right.
at the cross.
He without sin do what?
And I just
For
think
the
we've had
first
this
time,
tabooness
yes.
around
Yes.
sexual, like sin or sex in general, and that is somehow worse than what other people are doing. And I can't think of a person who sits in these pews who hasn't done something wrong. And we
Exactly.
can't ask people to come to the church and feel comfortable around us when we do that.
Right. Right.
Oh gosh, so just listening to what you guys talk about, two things that pop in my head. One is sanctification. It's like we forget about sanctification. We forget about that this
Spirit.
whole thing is a journey, and that you're right. We're going to miss the mark. But but as long as we keep coming back,
That's it.
and so that's where you're right. We have to change the narrative, because the narrative that the church is presenting around purity right now is the judgment is so harsh that you're pushing people away, and they're not coming back. They don't. Why should I come back if this is what I'm coming back into?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, I understand. I made a mistake, and now I need to reconnect with God, but not in the face of what you're presenting, you know. And then there's the whole thing where it's the danger of that seen or perceived sin versus unseen sin.
Yes.
So you know what? Just because you see or think you see my sin, that doesn't make you better than me.
There you go.
You know, it doesn't at all, because guess what? Just because, you know, I'm not over here thinking that just because I don't see your sin, I'm not naive enough to think that you not sinning.
There
You know,
you go.
Yeah.
you
There
know,
you go.
like you said, church would just be everybody coming up and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry." You know, there would be no sermon. That's just all it would be, or whatever. And finally, ladies, we got to stop making women feel like they are responsible for the morality and purity of men.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm sorry. I can wear what I want, say what I want, walk how I want,
can
whatever.
I just share this
and whatever you
statistic?
do is on you.
80% of women believe that a boy can't help but lust after a girl who is dressed like she is trying to entice it. 80%. That is that we need to talk to the men, need to also learn that it is not their nature to just not be able to control it. Because self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. They can.
And it's like, it's not even happening just in church. Obviously, we see this in schools too, as a result of the church's influence on everything. So like dress code, you can't wear spaghetti straps because you're going to be too distracting. You can't wear these shorts because the boys won't be able to focus because they're going to be looking at you. Well, then the boys need to get their act together and focus for themselves, because I mean, it's hot. I don't want to wear jeans, and they can wear muscle shirts.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Double standard.
But when you were talking about people coming up and, you know, at your old church, and they made them, my dad always says this thing: the devil calls us by our sin, but the Lord calls us by our name.
That's
So I think that when you have these people that come up and are basically forced to tell their sin like this, the sins that you can obviously see, that's going to deter them away from the church.
Yeah.
Because they know what you do. They saw you on the corner at the strip club. They saw you, but why? So why aren't you up here? So why am I the one up here having to bare my soul and you're not up there? And you're a pastor. You're a whatever. Why am I the one? Are we not equal? Are we not all equal? So I think that's what is deterring a lot of younger people away from this hypocrisy about literally everything, especially morality and purity.
And it's something we haven't even touched on, is that the church really just should be concerned about what they're teaching about sex, because it's obviously been a huge issue. And we know in the news, we have heard about the Catholic Church. We've heard about the Southern Baptist Convention. And this is a huge deal. How we talk about this and what we say and how we frame purity and sex in the church matters.
Yes.
One of the most revolutionary things I believe, for me, it was revolutionary in my life, that I ever heard. I heard at a marriage conference or couples retreat here at First Missionary, and the presenter said, "Sex is an act of worship." And I was like, what if that's the narrative we presented? Be like, you know, the way God intended it.
Right.
It is an act of
worship.
What a beautiful thing is that?
Yeah.
How, you know, if we took all the stigma away and if we stop saying what you don't do, and we start saying, hey, this is what you do, and this is how you do it, and this is how beautiful it can be when you do it that way.
Right. Because this book I was reading, it talked about how so many women go into marriage and they have never had sex, and that's what they were taught, and then they don't know how to understand pleasure
Wow.
with their
Right.
own husband. And that is a sad reality for so many women, and it's like we gotta fix this.
Yep. Yeah.
Because that's not what God
Not right.
intended,
It's
right?
Right.
A lot of good thoughts here. A lot of good thoughts. Well, does anyone have any final thoughts of like what we've talked about today? I don't know. I agree with. I feel like we kind of all agreed on a lot of things, but I think everything was so powerful, and
Yeah.
It was.
this
It was.
conversations that need to happen.
It was.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and I kept thinking about how honestly every topic really did kind of flow and lead into other discussions and everything. And I think what I'm seeing like that ties everything is like the church has work to do.
Right.
The church just has so much work to do. Not that it never had, but it's just we can't get comfortable, as you said, and continue to do the work
Yeah.
that is set before us. And I don't care what time you live in, it's now more than ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is the type of attitude we need to take.
Absolutely. It starts with honesty, authenticity. Just being able to have these conversations is what matters.
Yep.
So
I think Pastor has us in the right direction with foolish followers, because all of the subjects that we have talked about today, it would take a foolish follower to stand out as a Christian, to be able to have these conversations with others, to be able to share with young women about purity, to go out and help with the civil rights movement, to help women understand about submission and how do we talk to people that heaven and hell is real. So it's going to take us being foolish followers, as Pastor is trying to teach us. And as you say, we've got work to do. We've got a lot of work to do, not only here at FMBC, but Christians as a whole. We've got a lot, because if you notice, Satan is busy 24/7.
Yep.
He's not taking a day off. He doesn't come to church as Andi says, and we get our praise on, and then as soon as we get in the parking lot, we have even forgotten that we have been to church.
Yeah.
But we have got to carry that Christian banner 24/7, all day, every day, all the time, and we can't take it down, because he's very busy, and we see that he is infiltrating every avenue that he can. Social media, as we say, is good, but we also know there's a lot going on in social media that Satan is taking over. So we as Christians, we got work.
Yeah.
We got to pull up our bootstraps and get on our marching shoes, and we have to get out there for every aspect of letting our light so shine before men that they will see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven. Yes.
All right. I feel like that ends on a part. We don't need to say anything else. She said it all. Did you have the generational gem, Lesli?
I do. So I have the honor of having the generational gem to kind of tie it all in. And so here it is. The generational gem for today. Doing good in the world will never be more important than being good in his word.
Oh, I like that.
All right.
Snaps for that. That was good.
Say that again, Les.
Yes. So doing good in the world will never be more important or even as important as being good in God's word. And because when we're that, we heaven and hell is real. Heaven is promised to us.
Yes.
We forfeit hell.
Yes.
We can be pure and free and without guilt. We can go out and we can seek justice for our brothers and sisters. We can live in harmony, and we know how to have right relationships. You know, with those that we love and care for. So.
Absolutely. I love that.
That's good.
Well, thank you to each one of you for being here and for sharing your heart and your message. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We're so
Yes,
glad that
thank
you're here.
you for
This has
being
been a
with us.
special edition of Four Brothers, the Four Sisters. We really would love for you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube. We're at fmbc.concord or fmbc-concord. You'll find us wherever. It'll be out there. But Four Brothers, it'll come out on the fourth Sunday of each month at 11:30 a.m. on YouTube. So don't miss that. And everyone, we're signing off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.